It's the Sittin Sportside podcast, exclusively on 1045theteam.com.
Welcome into the Sittin Sportside podcast right here on 1045theteam.com. I am your host for today's podcast, at least, Eric Hannmann. Thank you for joining me on this special edition. And I know if you haven't heard me in a while, the last couple of weeks, I have been away on a little bit of a vacation. To give away the small details, I was in England first for my sister's wedding celebration. Won't go into details about that per se, but we'll go on and talk about my week there and the following week that I spent in Italy. Why does it have to do with sports? Why does that have to do with sports? That's where I'm going to come into this. Why am I doing a podcast about this? But guess what? I was in England for their World Cup. Lost to Croatia in the semifinal. I was in an English pub during that game, and I wanted just to share my experience not only there, but throughout watching the France game, the final, the thoughts around England, and just kind of my feelings of being in a country that cares about soccer so much during the World Cup, the differences, and then even a little bit of tidbits of things that went on in Italy that I was able to talk. It was post World Cup. The World Cup had just ended that Sunday before I went, but some interesting things to go on there, and just a couple tidbits. But let's start it off, right? So throughout that whole week leading up to the wedding celebration and whatnot, it was all about that. On that Wednesday, it was all about England versus Croatia. Now, let me start off with the Tuesday game against France. We went to we had the best view probably in that pub. I would say that the pub that we went to for there was not necessarily packed per se. People were probably watching the game, but they were getting ready to do it the next night. It was a great atmosphere. There was definitely people to watch it, but it wasn't as bumping. It was a great game to watch. It was a really fun night. France wins 1-0 against Belgium to get to the final. And that's not mince any words here. I picked France at the beginning to win this World Cup. Call it luck, call it knowledge, but hey, I felt pretty good seeing them get to the final and beating Belgium. And it was almost like a foregone conclusion. And that's how people felt there. It was, France and Belgium, whoever wins this matchup is going to win the World Cup. It was the ultimate feeling there. There was this sense of, for some people, that, hey, like, maybe we'll win. You heard that maybe, we get to that final and anything can happen, right? We take care of the side that really wasn't a tough side in that World Cup. We get to the final and boom. Maybe we could pull up an upset. But we go into that game against Croatia, and not, 5 minutes, in the 5th minute, on a free kick, Kieran Trippier, and listen, let me just give the lead up to this. We were just out having, walking around, kind of shopping after the day that we went to Winston Churchill, the bunker during World War II. After that, we're walking around waiting to meet up with my sister to go to this pub. And look, there was just a guy walking around with the radio trying to pump everybody up. Hey, England. And look, maybe the section that I was in didn't care enough about it, because no one was really pumping it up with him. But I was sitting there like, yeah, this guy's got this. Like, he's walking throughout the streets, trying to get people pumped up. It was definitely an English nationalistic song, and it was just, for me, it was kind of cool to see that. One less caveat moving up to this game and building up to it. They were really playing this, I guess it was an old song, It's Coming Home. And it was this big thing, football or soccer, as we call it, was invented in England. So it's coming home. The World Cup is coming home. And there was this big rallying cry throughout the entire time. There was a really funny story when we were getting a beer. This guy was lost his wallet. And, the bartender actually had found it. And, someone just yells out, "Your wallet's coming home, mate!" And it was just really fun. You saw messages all over the place on the TV from English celebrities like Robbie Williams, Dua Lipa, among others. So it was a really fun rallying cry. And I will play it as an outro on the song. I'll play the outro here at the end of this podcast. So when you leave it, you'll hear what they were playing and singing. It's an interesting song. I'll play it at the end of this podcast. But we get to there, and listen, the place just went absolutely nuts when Trippier gets that goal in. And once again, let me just talk to you about, not to get off on another tangent, but to talk to you about what the expectations were going into this game from my sister's fiance, who is English, and amongst some other people that I met along the way, and talk to you about the World Cup. It was one of those things where, as I mentioned earlier, this was not a tough side in the World Cup, if you know what I mean. They squeaked past Colombia. They beat Sweden. It wasn't like they were really playing these great teams. And then you face Croatia, and Croatia showed that they were a good team throughout this World Cup. They won all 3 of their group stage games, but they had a couple bad. They had to win in penalty kicks against Denmark and Russia, and so there was still this sense of, I don't really know, is Croatia really the real deal? And when England goes up 1-0, it was almost like, wow, like this is actually going to happen for a lot of those England people, because their expectations were before, well, we got this far. We shouldn't be here. Our team really isn't that good. We really shouldn't be here. And if whatever happens tonight, we'll care less. We'll still be happy because we got this far. We weren't expecting to get this far. So there's still kind of this positive vibe of, even if the game went wrong, that they would be okay after the game. That kind of changes when you go up in the 5th minute. Oh my goodness, now we can win this game. And you go into halftime still with that 1-0 score. Like, that changes. You can feel it shifting of, this is it. People were still pessimistic, the classic, oh, we're probably going to blow this. But it was almost as if you're looking at it, hey, this is going to happen. Then you get the amazing, acrobatic goal by Ivan Persic. And you kind of get everyone gets the feeling as Croatia continues to dominate the second half. It was all, this is typical England. It's typical England. And then when you get to the extra time, first 15 minutes go by. Still, we're going to get the penalty kicks. We're going to get the penalty kicks. And then the 4th minute into the next one, 109th minute of the entire match. And Mandzukic gets that goal to seal the deal. And I'll be honest, actually, and I'll blame this on my mom. We were a little nervous about what was going on there. Croatia scores that goal. We were like, okay, we'll get out of the pub. So we left the pub. And let me tell you, it's really weird walking around streets. And I mean, we walked around streets at night, not during the World Cup, and there were, wasn't necessarily empty, but it was close. It was like you see a person here and there and a couple people. But when you walk out on that street that night, in the last 10 minutes of that game still going on, there's nobody on the street. Like, there was literally, we might have been the only people on that street at that moment. There were still people, sometimes you'd come across a pub where people were standing outside kind of watching it through the glass, which we ended up kind of watching their couple opportunities towards the end there. But there's just that missed opportunity. They got dominated in the second half. They missed opportunity with Harry Kane in the first half. They felt like they really could win this game, and that they didn't. But I think overall there was a lot of positivity because of the fact they didn't expect to be there. And so after the initial hurt, because don't get me wrong, the hurt was there for a lot of people. And why wouldn't it be? But after that, the initial hurt, I feel like they got back to their moment before the match where they said, we shouldn't have been this far. We shouldn't have gotten this far. And they ended up being very positive about it afterwards. So we obviously wait to the Sunday's the Cup final. And let me say something, though, about the Saturday game real quick. I was talking about Saturday was the wedding. And honestly, throughout that entire day, and not saying that people would mention it, but I kind of expected someone to say, oh, England is playing in the 3rd place game right now. Not one single mention of the 3rd place game happened during that wedding among a bunch of English people that were there that probably cared about England as a team. And like I said, I don't know who's going to mention that. There's a lot of small talk at weddings as well. So I talked soccer with one guy and a couple, one guy who said he didn't really care about England. Like, Sunderland's his team. And it's funny to talk to these guys because Sunderland is a team that literally just got, in the last 2 years, went from the top league, Premier League, to English League One, which is the 3rd tier. They got relegated 2 years in a row, which is absolutely insane. And these people are reeling from it. It's kind of funny to hear them talk about it, because it's like the Mets. It's like being a Mets fan, to relate it to New York sports. Like, oh, here we go again. The Mets got relegated, but it's like, oh, the Mets. It's just who we are. And that was interesting to hear the other guy, though, say, hey, Sunderland's my team. And he was a guy that watched Premier League. He said he got rid of all the packages and just watched English League Championship, which is like someone saying, I'm not going to watch the NBA all year because I'm going to watch my favorite player who got relegated to the D League, who just got drafted. It's not quite the same, but it's kind of that point where the guy literally said, I might watch a game of the week here and there, but I'm not going to watch that much Premier League, which is the #1 league, because my team, Sunderland, now you got to watch your team, of course. And that's where things get different in England. But they were so bad, they get relegated again. I think for me, I'd rather watch the top tier, soccer for the most part, and then of course my team. Like when I was watching, when I watch NBA, I watch the Brooklyn Nets and the good games. And if there's a good game going on and the Nets are playing, you maybe don't call me a real fan. I don't know. There's some fans out there that might be mad at me for saying this, but I'll probably turn into the game that's good in the fourth quarter rather than the Nets being up or down by 20 or even a 10-point game. I mean, I think if both are close, he's obviously flipping through the channels. But so it's interesting to hear that he doesn't really care about England as much because he's like, Sunderland's my team. But of course, you have other people who are really that I knew at the wedding that had talked to me about it before and that were really heartbroken. Not one mentioned in the third place game. Of course, they lose 2-0. 2-0. But still, I found it kind of interesting that just no mention of the third place game. No one cared about watching it because we're sitting there, standing outside having hors d'oeuvres before the big reception, and no one's really caring about. I got to go watch this game. I don't know. I feel like that's an interesting thing for me. Maybe people were like, "Oh, I'm DVRing it. Don't tell me the score." I don't know. No one's really brought that up because I didn't bring it up myself, except for that one person who ended up being the guy who didn't care about England. But the England national team. I'm sure he cares, but you know what I mean. And so it was just interesting to me that happened. And Sunday was definitely fun. You could go around the town. People were going nuts. I think who are the French people in in England. We got around a bar. People were you definitely see some French shirts and people were very happy across the streets. Very good final game. Great job. I'm a big Paul Pogba fan, and then Mbappe, that goal in the 65th minute was sensational. Let me give you a lot more thoughts here. I've gone a little bit over the 10-minute threshold that I wanted to get to, but let me just give you real quick my last thoughts about this in terms or my last thoughts on my experience. I went to Italy, and Italy wasn't in the World Cup either, and it was fun to hear some people, and it wasn't necessarily, it was actually an American tour guide that I had who was in Italy for 10 years, kind of joking about that they weren't in it. And Italy's kind of a weird place because they actually weren't united until, I believe, sometime in the 1800s. So there's a lot of differences between the different areas in Italy. And that's when they really come together, is during the World Cup. And then that didn't happen. It's going to be another 4 years and 8 total years before they really get back together and unified as a country. Now, that's just a funny joke that I think the guy made, but it was interesting to be in a country that kind of went through the same thing the United States did of not making the World Cup. Maybe a little bit more of an embarrassment for them because they're a team that actually has won a World Cup and considered a team that could win the World Cup, while the U.S. really hasn't gotten that. And my last thing, what I wanted to say was, like, I couldn't go. This is a really exciting thing, and the thing about the soccer leagues all over with the exception, I think, of really, honestly, of the Premier League, they're really, you go to La Liga, it's Barcelona, Real Madrid. You go to the Bundesliga in Germany. That's literally just Bayern Munich that really is probably going to win that. So while you might have a difference here and there, there's most of the leagues, it's one team or the rest. Premier League seems to have 5 or 6 that really are in it every year, but sometimes someone just runs away with it. Man City did that this past year. Chelsea the year before. Juventus, they're that team in the Serie A in Italy. And they just got, who else but the best player in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo. And let me tell you, you could not go that long without seeing a Cristiano Ronaldo Juventus jersey already. I mean, they are all over the place, all around. Rome, Florence, Venice, the 3 cities that I visited. They're obviously being sold on the streets. Whether legit jerseys or not, don't ask me. But I've seen them all over the place. You see Juventus jerseys. Sometimes you'd get some old ones, but they mainly were just, you see the 7 on the back of the jersey, it's a Cristiano Ronaldo jersey. They're already going nuts over the guy that's going to be playing for the best team in Serie A. That's my experience. A quick podcast, nothing less than 15. And I'm going to give you something real quick, a tease of another podcast that I should have coming throughout the rest of the season. Obviously, there's a trade deadline podcast that I'm trying to do probably either on trade deadline day, but most likely it's going to be a reaction to the trade deadline. The Zach Britton trade was just made. The Yankees just acquired him when I'm recording this podcast. So, listen, I won't give my thoughts on that necessarily here, other than the fact that the Yankees bullpen is going to be stacked. I love that the deal was made. Dylan Tate is a tough prospect to get rid of, and the 2 others, well, they weren't necessarily well known, and I wasn't necessarily, even as a guy who really pays attention to the prospects, didn't hear about them too much. They had some good numbers. So it's not like they're giving up nothing. They're giving up stuff. They're giving up decent amount. And I know people are saying, look, they didn't give up one of their top prospects. Well, they kind of gave up some good ones. And Dylan Tate has potential to be a decent starter in Major League Baseball. So hopefully Britton gets the job done and is a great reliever and adds to really what is a fantastic bullpen. It should make it now, if it wasn't already, the best bullpen in the major leagues. I'll have more coming up throughout the rest of the season to hopefully keep within 15 minutes or less, ideally 10 to 15 minutes podcast. You can catch on 1045theteam.com. Click on the podcast tab and click on the Sittin Sportside podcast. Or just go to youtube.com/T1045 and go to the Sittin Sportside podcast playlist. So, once again, I'd like to thank you for tuning into this edition of the Sittin Sportside podcast. I'm Eric Hannmann. Hope to talk to you again soon.
We'll go on getting back, so getting back, so getting back, so getting back. It's coming, football's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming, football's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming, football's coming home. Everyone seems to know the score. They've seen it all before, they just know.
You get the gist. Kind of corny.